Being in Canada, we get an awful lot of Land Rovers coming in with tired engines because of this 15-year rule. They're a little bit old and they can have hundreds of thousands of kilometres on them. And the principal engine I see is 300 TDIs. That's why we just do 300 TDIs here, because we don't see much else. A couple of 200 TDIs, a few 2.5s. But a question I'm often asked is, should I get a rebuild or a reconditioned engine, or should I get a remanufactured engine? What is the difference? Good question, eh? So what is the difference? As far as I could actually tell you, a rebuild involves no machining. Now this can be funny because you could rebuild an engine yourself at home with me as helping you, but send the block away to get rebored and the crank away and then bring it back and then you'll rebuild it. But actually, technically speaking, it would be a remanufactured engine because you've had machining done. If you have a gearbox like a transmission or an axle and you want to rebuild it, well, all you do is take out the old parts, the old bearings, and put it all back together again. You wouldn't buy a casing and everything like this, because otherwise you'd buy a new gearbox. But neither would you machine a worn out casing, because it's just not worth it. But reboring blocks and regrinding cranks is very, very common, and they can bring them back up to spec, and you can get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kilometres out of them again. And this is why sometimes you'll see Turner Engineering do rebuilt long engines. That means it's a block, head, cover, valves, oil pan, but no ancillaries, no front timing. It's got the oil pump on the front because the oil pump is actually like the timing cover. But you don't get a flywheel, you don't get an adapter housing, you don't get anything. But they're expensive, but they've been done properly. Now I've had the opportunity to have a rebuilt engine from the UK here. I'm not going to mention who was the supplier, and I have no idea who was the rebuilder of this engine, but it wasn't very good. So I've had a look at it, and I'll tell you what I can find. It's a bit of detective work, but you get what you pay for, because the rebuilt engine was almost half the price of a remanufactured engine. So just be careful when you're making a choice of engines. This is why I rebuild them here, because it's generally too expensive to import a full engine from the UK, like a rebuilt one, and find out it's an absolute crock. So you might as well rebuild them here. So let's have a look at the cylinder head of this rebuilt engine, and you will see exactly why I put new heads on, and so do Turners, because they're not, you could have problems, believe me. Let's have a look. This is the cylinder head off the engine. Looks kind of normal. But the first thing that strikes me as really unusual is, why is there a black valve on there? Do black valves matter? I don't know. You can see where they've been sort of cleaned up. You know, there were some stains and they've cleaned them up. It could be that it's had new exhaust valves in, if you see what I mean. These are the inlets, the bigger ones, but it looks like the exhaust valve has been replaced. Did they cut the seats down if they machined the head? I don't know. But we're going to be detectives and look at this in a minute. The head gasket fitted was the old composite types. I've never fitted these for years. I always fit the multi-layer shim gaskets. It was a 3-hole gasket, which is usually the commoner garden gasket fitted to a 300 TDI head, but you'll see later on that this was wrong. So what is wrong? What gives... You would have thought that had been skimmed, wouldn't you? But if it had been skimmed, right, how come we can see stain marks here? Wait a minute, it's knocked itself on. Surely if it had been skimmed, we wouldn't see any marks here, would we? Of course not. Now let me get the camera set up, because I want to show you something really important. Before you ever do any work on a cylinder head, you should always pressure test it. Now pressure testing can verify that there's no cracks in the head. That's good. But always be observant. Look here. Can you see here? There is a crack between the valves here. See? Now, I'm going to pressure test this valve later on today. This head. I'm going to pressure test this head later on today. But that's not all. Let me have a shifty and see if I can do a zoom on this one as well. Wait a minute, it's kind of tricky because when you zoom in, it's... Can you see that? There's a crack here. Alright. There also is... See if I can get this without moving the camera. Wait a minute, I'll turn this off. So, to sum up, this hasn't had a... I don't think this has been flattened. It might be flat already, but they haven't machined it, because otherwise we wouldn't see these marks in here. We'd see a nice constant swirl going right the way across, and we're not. I'm concerned about some cracks. There's cracks here, there's cracks here, and the cracks here, and here. There is a little tiny crack between the injector hole and the glow plug hole. But what is concerning about the glow plug holes is, I know from experience when I've tried to drill these out before in the past, that you can actually easily drill into the water jacket around the glow plug. So again, is it really worth messing about? Just plonk another head on and it's done. I know it sounds a cop-out, but time's money, isn't it? You don't want to be wasting customers' money. So that's the head. I wasn't happy with that. But when you look at it from the outside, you know, it's got the silver paint on as usual. But it looks good, it's nice and clean, no problems there. And of course, I think they must have put new valves in. The valve guides on the TDIs very rarely go, but sometimes they do. But let's have a look at the pistons over here. I've assembled the pistons on the crankshaft just to sort of feel what they're like, if you see what I mean, if there's any play on them, if they're nice and smooth, without using plastic gauge and things like that. Usually when you've done these things a long time, you can feel them, and they feel quite nice. That crank's kind of good. The pistons, on the other hand, they've used the old pistons, and this one isn't too bad. You can probably make out the machining marks in there, but this finish on here is like an anti-friction finish, and you can see where it's sort of worn off. But the pistons are nice and clean. But when we look down here, we can see that that's all completely worn off. This is off, this is off. Is it important? No. No. What is the important thing is, are the bores nice and parallel? You know, you need to really take it down to an engineering shop and measure it up if you haven't got the right micrometers. So that was one thing. The bearings on the crankshaft and things like this had all been replaced, but with whose make, I don't know. Probably little cheap ones, because I don't know. They're standard, but they're not the original bearings, if you see what I mean. There is a mark there. I don't know if you can see, if I can hold it in and somebody can tell me what those are. I'm not sure about the bearings. They look good, but are they copper coated underneath? This is the thing we don't know. It's hard to tell with bearings, eh? They look okay, but are you going to, if you're going to do a remanufactured engine, are you going to put cheap bearings in? Is it worth it? Let's have a look at the block. So this is the block. You can see the face is just had a bit of sandpaper put across it, and that's about it. It hasn't been decked, because you can still see the marks in here around where the gasket was. And a telltale sign usually is that this bit here that's sticking out the back is usually rusty. If you see that's been nice and shiny and got machine marks in, well, it's obviously been decked. As for cylinder bores, this is the tricky one, because there is a tolerance within the Land Rover book, because bores go a little bit pear-shaped. Down in the middle they get a little bit wider. But if they're within tolerances, that's fine, it's no problem. But you don't want to go, you don't want them like 2 millimeters out or anything like ridiculous like that. These bores on here look remarkably good. They really do look remarkably good bores, but I haven't got a micrometer, digital micrometer, to go down inside there and measure them. I've got just like a fixed micrometer which I can tell the sizes, but I can tell they're a little bit oval, but are they in spec? So this is going to go down the machine shop, and we're going to take it back. We're going to take it back down to the machine shop once this lockdown's finished, hopefully, and we can get back to normal. It looks like it's had new camshaft bushes fitted at the front. Let's put this back a bit. Down here, it looks like it's had new camshaft bushes fitted, because the camshaft can wear with a groove inside here, and these look nice, and when I took the camshaft out it was really, really nice. So maybe this was in spec, maybe, you never know. But again, one of the little things that they actually missed out on was the core plugs, or the frost plugs. See, whenever I do a 300 TDI block, I always take the plugs out, and look, these have never been out. See, look, these have never been out. This one's been out. How can you tell? Because they've used red silicone to put it in with. Not good. This is like a typical one you take out if it's had Prestone, or antifreeze should I say, in the system all its life. That's good. And this one, yeah, no, this one's been replaced as well at some time, because again you can see the telltale signs of silicone. So they've replaced 2 but not all 5. A bit of a shortcut, but I don't know. I'll do a video, I'll insert a video from another, when I was stripping this block down, on using red silicone sealer, the RTV. It's not good stuff, and this is why when I've got gaskets I generally use blue Hylamar on paper gaskets, not silicone. You'll see why in this next section. You can see around here where the oil passage is. This comes from the pump, and look, all it needs is a bit of oil pressure to push that off eventually and block up any orifices. This is again why Hylamar, the blue Hylamar, is good for gaskets, because if it gets into oilways and things like that, it's not really the end of the world, because it gets mangled up with the oil, but this stuff doesn't. It blocks passages up. So there you go. It follows the old adage, you get what you pay for. If you're going to buy a cheap engine rebuild, well, you might as well do it yourself. Follow some guidelines I've put down, and other people. By all means, take the block and the crank down to a machine shop and get them checked out and say, yeah, that's okay. Oh, it just needs a crank polish. That's it. It doesn't always necessarily mean it needs major machining, but have a second opinion from people if you're going to do it yourself. And after that, it's you're home and dry. Now, there's nothing against rebuilds. There's nothing at all against rebuilds, providing you look at some few telltale things and do it right yourself. It's not that difficult to do.